Now, as South Africa continues to battle blackouts, there have been concerns about the impact these will have on food security. Eskom has announced stage 6 power cuts indefinitely, and the agriculture sector and others have raised concerns about the continuous blackouts and the impact on their businesses. Now, a Minister of Agriculture, Thoko Didiza, met with these sectors and joins us now to give us some feedback about that meeting, and she joins us virtually from Pretoria. Minister Didiza, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I know these are crisis times for so many of our sectors. You made a point in the meeting yesterday, I believe it happened yesterday, of acknowledging the difficulties that our agricultural sector has faced as a result of these ongoing load shedding. So this has been taking place for some years now. But I get the sense, and I don't know if you agree, that many of our farmers have now find themselves at breaking point as a result of these increasingly higher stages of load shedding that's happening over a longer period of time. What did they tell you in that meeting about the particular crisis point they find themselves in right now, especially as we are in the deep summer where the watering of our crops are of absolute importance?
Well, I must say that yesterday's meeting was a very important one because it enabled us as government to also get a sense of the impact that this load shedding is having, particularly stage 6, on our farm sector as well as the agribusiness industry. And as you say, that particularly for those who are irrigating, it's quite difficult when you've got sudden load shedding that goes on for so many hours. It does have an impact on your production cycle. But also, you know that some of our processors, particularly in the milling in the fruit industry, do also face a strain, particularly on the cooling of the fruits, as well as the processing of their mills, particularly to get maize, as well as your mealies. All of those are impacted upon. So there was a real, serious concern that we need to find a way in which we can ameliorate this condition such that it does not affect food security in the country.
I get the sense from the pause that you took there that it would have had been a meeting where perhaps some emotions spilled over, such as the tenseness and the anxiety of the situation.
I must say that there wasn't much of the tenseness in the engagements. And I must applaud the agricultural industry because they do appreciate the challenges that the country is facing. However, they are actually saying, let's look at ways in which we can manage this crisis better such that it does not affect our food security as a country. For instance, there were certain proposals that were made by some of the industry on how this can be managed, which will ensure that we engage with the Public Enterprises Minister, the Energy Minister, as well as Eskom, to see how best we can do that. Also, the industry was looking at long-term solutions which will enable us to actually make some adaptations where there can be some own generation in some of our subsectors, as well as looking at how we could start to diversify to solar in some, as well as other energy sources that can assist us to better manage the situation.
Now you, as a result of this meeting, there was a decision that a small sector task team, I believe you're calling it, will be set up. Can you tell us who will be on this team and what they're aiming to achieve? And like you said, it sounds like there's going to be short-term as well as long-term solutions and maneuverings that they'll be looking at.
Yes. Firstly, there has already been a survey that some of the industry players had started to put in place so that we can assess the financial impact as well as the impact on the production cycles in a number of our industry. So we've extended that survey so that it can cover the entirety of the industry. So the task team will actually comprise industry players, government, not just the Ministry of Agriculture and Land, but also the Department of Trade and Industry, the Department of Public Enterprises, the Department of Energy, because collectively we also need to look at how we address this issue. We also are bringing some energy experts into the mix so that we can look at the short, medium, and the long-term solutions.
Was there the question asked about whether certain parts of the agricultural sector, depending on where they find themselves in their seasonal cycle, could be considered as an essential service, much like we've had to do with hospitals and the like? Or I know I'm talking from a layman's person's point of view, so I don't understand the science and the technology around it, but was something like that discussed?
Yes, something like that was discussed, and also looking at the sequencing, for instance, because some of the industry may be at the point where they require more energy sources at a particular point in time, and in some areas, they might not be requiring more of that energy. One of the things, for instance, that came out in the discussion was at a stage 2 level, the industry was able to manage. But also what we need is certainty, so that it's not like you wake up this morning and you are told now you are going on stage 6, because that affects the planning. So part of the engagement with all other players, including Eskom, will be to say, what is the long-term view of Eskom in terms of the load shedding, so that there can be some planning as to how the industry can adjust and plan itself properly.
Just before I let you go, I know we're talking about long-term, medium-term and short-term solutions for the ongoing issue. Just before I let you go, perhaps if you could give us an idea, what are the short-term solutions? I don't know, how long does it take to put up a solar panel, for instance, and if that is decided for a certain farm that finds themselves in a particular bind right now as a result of load shedding, has the department perhaps discussed how they could help them, give them a leg up, a subsidy, I suppose some would call it? Can you take us in your confidence and tell us what are some of those short-term interventions that you perhaps have put forward?
That's exactly why I'm saying that the task team would look at those short-term issues. You are asking, how long does it take to put a solar panel? It doesn't take long. But remember that these are investments that people might not have thought about right now. And therefore, what kind of support can they be assisted with to make sure that they are able to shift and utilize solar energy by putting up panels as well as inverters? So those are some of the discussions that the task team would look at and present to us within 2 weeks.
Now, Minister, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to take off your hat as Minister of Agriculture as we continue to mourn the loss of Frene Ginwala, an icon, a sister, a leader of human rights as well as justice and empowerment of women. There's a certain generation of members of the ANC, or freedom fighters particularly, who will remember the vast impact that Frene Ginwala had on them. And I do believe you would form part of that generation. Your thoughts when you heard of the passing of Frene Ginwala?
I must say that it was indeed a shock, because obviously no one ever expects that an individual would bid you farewell in such a sudden manner. But one appreciates the good life that Comrade Frene Ginwala has led, both in terms of her contribution in the struggle for freedom of South Africa, in the struggle for women's emancipation. I worked very closely with Comrade Frene Ginwala in the women's movement prior to 1990, but also after 1990, more specifically in 1992, when I was asked to be the Secretary General of the Women's Coalition, and her as well as Ncebe were co-conveners of that Women's Coalition. And I must say that the way in which she led that process, bringing in diverse sectors of women from various walks of life, was an important one. On one hand, ensuring that there's evidence base in terms of research and understanding what is it that women of South Africa want in terms of the future, post-apartheid South Africa. At the same time, ensuring that that research is also done in a popular fashion, such that we have mass-based engagement with women to express their views on what type of South Africa do they want for women of South Africa, but also for general South Africans. It was a very important one, because until 1994, we were able to work on that process and present the Women's Charter for Effective Equality, which actually informs policymaking in the post-apartheid government, as well as the other sectors of the economy, a template that indicated what are those issues that women of South Africa were concerned about. I must also say that during that process, it also had an impact in ensuring that in the crafting of the very constitution, even the interim constitution, women were not only supporters of those who were negotiators, but they became part and parcel of the negotiators themselves. You'd recall after the Boipatong massacre that when CODESA resumed, actually it was one man, one woman from each party that participated as negotiators in the constitution, in the negotiation process for a new constitution. So one is very, indebted in what Comrade Frene imparted to some of us, but also to a number of South Africans. If you looked at her tenure as a Speaker of South Africa and how she facilitated the participatory democratic process where citizens will be able to have an insight of what was going on through those walls of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, by ensuring that, there will be a live feed that make sure that communities are able to see where parliamentarians as public representatives are debating the issues that affect them. But also the way she dealt with issues of managing that house in an impartial manner, ensuring that all those people who are there as public representatives are able to raise their concerns without fear or favor. And the administration of Parliament itself, she therefore set a really good foundation on our parliamentary processes and how our constitutional democracy will further mature in our country. And we'd like to thank the family who really gave us such an outstanding human being who will continue to remember her own contribution in the struggle of freedom in our country, but also in the rebuilding of South Africa.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is our Minister of Agricultural Affairs, Thoko Didiza. They're sharing her thoughts on the life and times of Frene Ginwala, who passed away earlier this week.